All right, hello everybody. Yes, it's your good friend Pozzible here, and I'm with some friends of mine for our first ever radio show. I'm hoping this will be a weekly thing, talking about current events and what's happening in it. Of course, it's going to star me, your good friend Pozzible, and over to my left, we're going to introduce.
Hi, this is Bucky. Also on Twitter, you can find me at PrisonerFan48.
And over to my right, we have.
Hello, this is Joe. I don't follow Twitter, so you just know me as Joe.
All right, guys. To get our weekly radio show started today, we are going to talk about the true future of superhero secret identities. I'm sure you've noticed that ever since 2002, when Sam Raimi was making Spider-Man, that ever since then, the whole notion of having a secret identity and the importance of a secret identity is something that's kind of gotten lost over the years. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. I mean, I'm sure we all remember back in the day in 1978 when Superman was reigning the silver screen.
Mm-hmm.
He pretty much, his secret identity was basically parting his hair and wearing glasses. And for his storyline, that was enough.
But remember, also in those stories, nobody knew that Clark Kent was Superman, even though they were right in front of a gunman who shot at them. And, nobody walked away knowing that he was Superman.
I mean, but those that wear masks, Spider-Man and Batman and the like, it's not uncommon for maybe one or two people close to that person to know that they're one and the same. However, with the recent insurgence of movies that have come out, Spider-Man, the Avengers, it hardly seems that the secret identity is that secret anymore.
Right, Joe.
I have to agree with him. I think more like with Iron Man, the big thing at the end, he just came out and said, "I am Iron Man," which I always felt in the comics he kept his identity secret.
Right. Especially in the Avengers comics. I mean, it got to the point where he wouldn't even tell his own teammates who he was, even though they worked out of his own building.
Right, there was always that separation. There was always, I mean, in the early days of comic books, and I'm going back to like the 40s and 50s now, if not the 30s, Steve Rogers was the bumbling, private in his unit, but when trouble started, he became Captain America. But nobody knew that Steve Rogers was Captain America. Like you said, Joe, in Avengers, in the early comic books of the Avengers, nobody knew that Iron Man was Tony Stark. They figured he was his bodyguard or something. What'd I do wrong?
I just heard you say Stony instead of Tony.
Oh, Tony Stark. Okay, well, yeah, that can happen sometimes. Well, it does bring us to our number one, a new segment, a trivia question for you guys to see if you guys know this answer. Who was the first hero to don a mask? There were lots of hero stories out there, but who was considered to be the first one to ever don the mask? Do any of you guys know?
In comic books?
Just in general, the first hero to don a mask.
In literature? I mean,
Joe is saying Zorro. Is that what you're sticking with?
I'm trying to think.
I mean, I'm trying to think. Does the Lone Ranger come before Zorro? I mean, that's another one.
That would be a good thing. But who came first, the Lone Ranger or Zorro?
I'm going with
Zorro.
Considering
that he's asking us that, it has to be one or the other.
Yes.
Otherwise,
I'm going with Zorro.
I'll go with the Lone Ranger.
And Joe has it. It is Zorro.
The only reason I thought of that is because when Batman or Bruce Wayne and his family came out of the theater, they went to see I think it was the Mark of Zorro.
Right.
So I knew Zorro came before Batman.
Right. I just didn't know when.
When did the Lone Ranger come out?
Oh, Lone Ranger was one of those stories that came out around the 20s and 30s.
Okay.
If not the 40s, but Zorro came out in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Like 1880 or 1890 is when Zorro came out, somewhere around there.
Right. I mean, the first actual movie was actually in the 1890s.
Yeah. It was Douglas Fairbanks.
I mean, even before that, one of the first movies on record, and this is actually a very funny story, was called The Great Train Robbery.
Right.
Now, at this point in time, the idea of moving pictures was totally new to all these people.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of The Great Train Robbery, there's this shot of this, there's a medium shot of this bank robber turning around and shooting at the audience.
Right.
And what makes that funny is that everyone in the audience, since these moving pictures were new to them, they didn't know how to react. So in fear, they ducked.
Right. One of the first scariest movies ever was The Arrival of a Train at a Station.
Yes, I remember hearing about that too in film class.
Right, because what happened was a train was just pulling up at the station. It was coming right at the camera. But remember, movies were a new phenomenon back then. So when people saw this train coming right for them, they panicked. People fainted, they ran, they didn't know what to expect from a train coming right at them because they didn't understand movies or anything. And one movie that's really great to really see about, movie magic and stuff like that is Hugo. It's really not the story of the orphan boy Hugo. It's the story of the man they discovered. If you ever see the old silent movies, there's this one movie where people go to the moon and they fire off this rocket that's just the shape of a bullet, and it hits the moon right in the eye. It's one of his famous works, but it's a great movie for that respect. All right, next up, we're going to talk about, and you see, I love my slashes. Will/should superhero movies/stories evolve past secret identities? Like, will we get to a point where, Peter Parker no longer has to don the mask of Spider-Man? Bruce Wayne no longer has to be Batman. Now, I don't like to use those two because those two, they've always served a purpose. Batman was always meant to be the symbol. He instills fear, But will we ever start making new superheroes without secret identities? Joe, your thoughts on that?
Well, we kind of already do. Like, look at the Fantastic Four. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're pretty much known. They don't wear masks.
Right.
Well, I mean, the Thing's kind of like one of them.
But he's always like
hidden.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
But the other three, they don't wear the masks.
And the government knows who they are.
Yeah.
Right. Well, everyone knows who they are.
Yeah.
Because they always do whatever the government says, which brings up a very good point. Mm-hmm. Recently in comic books, I wouldn't say recently, it's probably been a year or two, they brought out this storyline called the Civil War. In which the government is basically forcing superheroes to reveal their identities to them. And, of course, there were two camps. In one camp, you had the people that did not want to reveal their identity because they feel it infringes upon their secret identity. Their secret identity is secret for a reason. And then there's the other camp that says, okay, the government's asking this on us, we better do what they say. And because of that, ultimately, one of my favorite superheroes, Spider-Man, revealed his identity to the world.
Right, and then they changed it back, and they were like, "Oh, he's they were able to hide his identity again in a very lame fashion, I think, but they had to get it back to normal somehow."
I actually have those issues, the graphic novels of there's two Spider-Man ones about him revealing his identity.
Now, also, when it comes to superhero movies and stories, besides the secret identities, what about beginning? Will we ever get past movies where they feel like they have to start from, the origin? They always start with the origin of it,
Right. My thought on that is that I feel that if it's a character we're not familiar with, tell us the origin for the first movie.
Right.
We don't need to see it in parts 2, 3, or 4. If it's a character we're already familiar with, like Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, just if the origin is pertinent to the storyline that we're about to see, just give us a brief overview in the opening credits. Enough where you give us the information we need in order to understand the storyline that's going to unfold. Yeah,
it's getting old, the idea that we have to start from the very beginning of every... You know what? Dude, one thing about the Superman movies I could never really understand, why do they always feel they have to kill his father in those movies? How much you want to bet with Man of Steel coming out, they're going to kill Jonathan Kent?
Spoiler alert.
Well, it's kind of obvious. I mean, but what's funny? I'll never forget that in Doomsday, one of the, the one where Superman dies, again, his father is still alive in the comic books. They never killed his father. But in every movie, in every storyline, like even in Smallville, they decide they're going to kill the father every time.
I mean, next thing you're going to tell me is that in the next Spider-Man movie, Uncle Ben's going to die again.
Yeah. Well, you know what, though? I will never tell you that... Darth Vader is Luke's father. Oh, darn it.
Well, you bring up the Superman and his father dying, but in the new release, the new 52, I believe both his parents are dead.
Really?
Yeah, I believe they killed off both his parents, and it's kind of like a retelling of the Superman. And
origin.
He's not really an origin so much, but it's him. Because it's not like him getting shot to Earth and all that. He's already Superman, but he's still trying to figure out what powers he has.
Right.
And that kind of brings up an interesting point about comic books themselves, is that if you notice since, I'm guessing around 1997 or 98, back, superheroes only had like one universe.
Right.
Know? And then all of a sudden, when the millennium hit, we got like this, we got these like new universes.
Multiverses, yeah.
Yeah, and all these different multiverses, and it's hard to like a superhero when we're so used to Spider-Man being Peter Parker, a brown-haired white boy, to being Miles Morales, a half-black, half-Latino, possibly gay superhero.
Right. Joe.
Actually, the DC multiverse, my first recollection of it was 1985 with the Crisis on Infinite Earths. So that was like kind of the big thing, how they put kind of that, they reestablished, I want to say, that probably isn't the wrong word, but that was where I first came into the whole, there's two different Supermans. There's the old Superman who was from Earth 2 versus the Superman that everybody knows from Earth 1.
Right. Well, gang, that is all we... Oh, go ahead, Bucky.
One quick thing is that since I don't read DC Comics that much, I will say from what I've observed just on the newsstands of comic books is that I do believe that DC has handled the multiverse a lot better than Marvel has. Because I think when Marvel created all these multiverses, they lost a lot of readers because people are buying too many titles just to keep one story straight.
Right, and the problem is that the stories were very different, you know?
Exactly.
But that's going to be definitely a topic for sooner rather than later about, these multiple multiple versions of a story that we already know about. They have to change like one or two things for whatever reason, but that is definitely something we're going to be discussing here in the near future. So stick with us, guys. We do appreciate you joining us. Say goodbye.
Goodbye.
So long, and thanks for all the fish.
Yeah, we'll catch you next time on the Pozzible radio station.